Good morning and welcome to the Temple of Light Center for Spiritual Living here in beautiful Kingston, Jamaica. And to those of you joining us on the World Wide Web, welcome. Let us begin, as we begin all things, with an affirmative prayer. In this moment, we recognize that there is one power, one presence, one perfecting and unifying presence. This we know as God. And in this recognition, we know that every aspect of this morning's service is an already perfect idea in this one mind, which is God. This mind is the mind that thinks through us, that speaks through us, and that allows us to recognize ourselves as one with each other, one with God, one in the consciousness of oneness, one power, one presence. So I know that for Rev Michael, every word that he speaks this morning is coming from within the heart of oneness. And every person who is tuned in hears with ears that are open and receptive to the idea. I give thanks for this knowing as I release these words now into that infinite law, knowing that it is already so. And so it is. Our inspirational reading this morning comes from Psalm 19, a Psalm of David. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. And if that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what will. This is poetry from the Bible. And now please join me in our praise song, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. And that's found in your program on page 2. Please stand.
Of sin and sadness, drive
Please remain standing as we say the prayer of our center. It is on the flyer. Together, the Temple of Light, Center for Spiritual Living, is a sacred field embodying our spiritual community, from which the Christ peace, love, and joy emanate, to touch, to heal, to bless, to prosper, and to liberate anyone who comes into contact with it in any way. The light of the Christ illumines us, our center, and our environment. Our spiritual community is filled with and surrounded by the presence of God and is growing from strength to strength. The power of God expands our consciousness of truth, guiding us ceaselessly along the paths of wisdom, spiritual growth, unfoldment, and attainment. We are blessed, and to God be the honor and the glory forever. And so it is. Please sit. We'll now have the lighting of the candle. I light this candle on behalf of all the youth of the world and for all mankind, knowing that we behold the Christ in you, and we see you as shining lights unto your world. God is blessing you now. And so it is. Now, let's rev it up a bit with our mission song.
The temple of light, the temple of light, the temple of light. We are a people with a vision, one spirit on a mission, to touch, to heal, to bless, to prosper, to love and liberate anyone who comes into contact with us, anytime, night or day. The temple of light, the temple of light, the temple of light. We are a people with a vision, one spirit on a mission, to touch, to heal, to bless, to prosper, to love and liberate anyone who comes into contact with us, anytime, night or day.
Amen.
Yay! And now that I've got you where I want you, now it's time for the announcements. Put on the glasses first. Our exquisite flowers this week are by Mrs. Connie Nugent and are a celebration of God's bounty. Thank you, Connie. They are beautiful. Please join us on Facebook Live at our Spiritual Mind Healing Service on Tuesday, October the 13th at 6 p.m. This week, our speaker will be practitioner Leon Williston. Also, join us for our Sunday celebration on October 18th at 9 a.m. EST, when the speaker will be our pastor, Reverend John Scott, and the host will be practitioner Jennifer Livingston. Please remember to call our office at 876-946-2230 if you are intending to attend our Sunday celebration in person. As you know, congregants attending must wear a face mask and observe the prescribed protocols. Please also remember to maintain the physical distancing and to leave the premises as quickly as possible after the service. If you can't bless us with your presence on a Sunday, you can still be with us in consciousness as services continue to be live streamed on Facebook Live. And we call this our Love Stream. Now, we have a special invitation to new members. If you have been attending services regularly or online, you are invited to become a registered member of our spiritual community. The only prerequisite is your hunger and thirst after righteousness and your attendance of at least one unit of Science of Mind classes. So as Reverend John would say, your assignment is to prayerfully ask Spirit's confirmation that this is the time for you to stand up and be counted. Speaking of classes, our Science of Mind classes begin on Tuesday, October 27th with Principles of Successful Living from 7 to 9 p.m. on Zoom. The facilitator will be Rev Michael Reckord. On Thursday mornings, beginning on October the 29th, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., join Reverend John Scott here in the sanctuary for Soulful Connecting, which is the continuation of a series begun before the pandemic. Also on Thursday evening, Reverends Sonia Davidson and Ann Shand are offering the series titled Wholeness from 7 to 9 p.m. on Zoom. Classes for non-residents of Jamaica cost US $16 for non-members and US $10 for members, payable through PayPal on our Facebook page. For Jamaican residents, classes cost 1,600 Jamaican dollars for non-members and $1,200 for members, payable at our office or to our savings account number 20941 at the Bank of Nova Scotia, Knutsford Boulevard. Please register by emailing or by calling the office at 876-946-2230. Who hasn't heard yet about Summit 2020? This is the big buzz at this time. By now, you should have received your invitation and details of the various activities beginning on October the 17th. So, please register your place so that you can receive your entrance number. Don't leave it until the day, since you might not be able to access the summit at that time. Register today. As the chair of our Thriving Ministry Council shared last Sunday, the budget for this historic undertaking is approximately 1.5 million Jamaican dollars. We are endeavoring to reduce this figure by leaning on your generosity in loaning and or contributing the following items. This, I believe, will be posted on the notice board and also online, but you may make a note of it now. 14 large palms or ficus plants in pots, 15 trestle tables, 15 large white tablecloths, 10 floral centerpieces, 12 stools, that's low stools, piano height, 20 chair covers in a mix of yellow and white, 2 large floral arrangements for the platform, 2 rolls of white and yellow sheer fabric. In addition, please consider contributing cash. We won't say no. No amount is too small or too large. We know that Spirit is ensuring all the requirements for this transformative event are met, and we thank you in advance for your consciousness of giving. You got all that? Summit 2020, and that begins this next weekend, the 17th. This morning at 10:30, following the service, Reverend Michael Reckord will be facilitating our discussion Discovery right here in the sanctuary and also on Facebook Live. The topic will be Lessons Learned from the Heroes in My Life. And you're invited, those of you in the sanctuary, to stay behind, if you can, to participate in this discussion. Many of you may have heard already our beloved Grace Brown, who ushered so faithfully for many years, made her transition to the light last Thursday evening after a brief illness. We surround her with love as we bless her onward journey to her new expression. We will keep the church family advised of arrangements for the celebration of her life. What good grace. For the past couple of weeks, our prayer line 876-978-1167 has been out of order. So please phone in your prayer requests to 876-946-2230 or email us at templeoflight@cwjamaica.com. If you feel moved to support our ministry of love and light, your loving gifts may be transferred to our savings account, number 20941, the Bank of Nova Scotia, New Kingston branch. Viewers who join us on Facebook Live, please visit the Home tab on your Facebook page, and you will find the link to our PayPal Donate button in the top post. If you're worshiping with us here in the sanctuary, there is a basket on either side of the podium in which you may place your offerings as you exit the sanctuary. This concludes our announcements. Now please join us in singing the hymn, "This Is You," on page 3 of your program, on the screen if you're watching on Facebook Live. Please stand. How marvelous, how wonderful, the universal love as manifested here in you and me. I look at you and see in you a God potential there. This is the real you in reality. So let the infinite love shine through. This is you, really you. Believe God's life is the heart of you. Wait no longer to know that it's true. How marvelous, How wonderful, how marvelous. Please be seated and help me welcome our speaker for this morning, Rev Michael Reckord, who is no stranger, who is a writer, a poet, a lecturer, and just an all-around nice guy. Please help me welcome Reverend Michael.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. And thank you, Carol, especially for that last epithet, all-round nice guy. I couldn't agree more. Friends, again, good morning. Welcome to those worshiping here in the sanctuary, in the Temple of Light, Center for Spiritual Living in Kingston, Jamaica. And I greet also those worshiping online via the internet. The breaking news is that it is a perfectly wonderful day. Now, I wrote that on Friday, before I started experiencing today. But I knew the statement would be true. Why? Because all the days made by God are perfectly wonderful. And that is whether it is pouring rain, or the sun is shining, or it is snowing, or a fierce hurricane is raging outside. All the days that God has made are perfectly wonderful. But how can that be, you ask? The days I've described are all different. And not just a little different. The conditions are diametrically opposed to one another. If we can call all of them perfect, we have to ask, what does perfect mean? Good question, though I ask it myself. And I'll be answering it in this talk, which is about science of mind's concepts of perfection, as well as the ideas of perfection of a number of other people. You see, we do toss around that word perfect a whole lot. A perfect day, I said. A perfect fit. A perfect storm. Perfect health. A perfect score, the perfect man, the perfect woman, a perfect egg. And speaking of eggs, anybody knows the joke about the curate's egg? It's a favorite of mine. Every time I hear it, I have to smile. And I'm so happy that I can include it. My favorite joke in my favorite church this morning. That phrase, a curate's egg, originated in a cartoon in the British magazine Punch more than 100 years ago. The title of the cartoon is True Humility. And the cartoon shows a bishop hosting a breakfast for a curate who is a low-level cleric. The bishop looks at the egg that he had just served, the curate, and says, "Oh dear, I seem to have given you a bad egg." The cleric replies, "Oh, no, Your Grace. I assure you, parts of it are perfect." You would probably reject the curate's concept of perfection just as you would reject a whole lot of other people's use of that word, perfect or perfection. The day that you go to the beach would not be perfect if it rained. But the same day might just be what 1,000 farmers wanted and would have considered perfect. So we see that perfection, this concept, this idea, is different to different people. And may be different even to the same person on different days and on different occasions. You know, if we start thinking deeply about that concept of perfection, we're going to get very philosophical. And in fact, I do want to get philosophical this morning. Man has been, you see, getting philosophical about perfection for thousands of years. So I'm going to take you back partly into the Bible thousands of years ago, and even further back, approximately 2,500 years, to the Greek philosopher Plato. His thoughts on perfection have been influential all over that period and right up to today. Plato believed that behind every single thing in our world, concrete things and abstract ideas, there is a perfect form, which is the true eternal essence of that thing. In our universe are imperfect copies of those things, imperfect copies of that perfect ideal form. For example, there are many different horses, big horses and small horses, gray horses and white horses, old horses and young horses, and so forth. And none of the horses that we see is perfect. According to Plato, each horse is an imperfect copy of the horse form, the one true horse, that ideal idea of a horse. And the horses that we see are all imitations of that one perfect idea of a horse. Give you an example. Like a tree forms a shadow, so is the tree itself, says Plato, a shadow of the one true, perfect form, which is the true tree. And he says that the theory of forms, his theory of forms, applies to physical objects as well as concepts like beauty and anger and good and evil. Now, Plato explains that we can't perceive these forms through our senses, hearing, seeing, etc. We need logic and mathematics to truly understand an ideal, perfect form. Through mathematics, for example, we have discovered the form of the triangle, which is a polygon with 3 sides. However, we will never be able to truly see with our eyes, physically, such a triangle. Even if we tried to draw a perfect triangle on a whiteboard with a ruler, its lines would never be perfectly straight and two-dimensional. It's imperfect, like the curate's egg. Now, who do we believe is perfect? We believe that God is perfect. But we might admit that it is a belief based on some evidence. Yes, we have some evidence of God. But we might not say that God is a fact, a truth that we can prove scientifically. But I have news for you. The 13th century Italian Roman Catholic priest, St. Thomas Aquinas, had 5, no less than 5, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, scientific arguments proving logically that there is a God, a perfect God. Now, if you ever meet an atheist who wants logical proof of the existence of God, maybe you'd like to try the 5 proofs of St. Thomas Aquinas. Let's hear 3 of them. First is the argument of the unmoved mover. This is how the argument runs. In the world, we can see that at least some things are changing. The seasons are changing, the trees are changing, etc. Now, whatever is changing is being changed by something else. If that something else is in itself changed, then it too is being changed by something else. But the chain cannot be infinitely long. So there must be some cause, something that is without itself changing, something changeless. What do we understand that changeless thing to be? God. Second proof of St. Thomas Aquinas. We can see around us that things are caused. But it is not possible for something to be the cause of itself, because this would mean that it was prior to its own existence, which of course is a contradiction. So, things are caused by something prior to themselves. Now, if that cause is itself caused, it too must have a cause. But again, this chain cannot be infinitely long. So there must be a cause which is not itself caused by anything further. And that first cause we understand to be God. And the third of his 5 proofs, I hope you have accepted the logic of them so far. It seems very logical. The third of the 5 proofs, I'm just giving you 3. In this world, we see that things are possible to be, like the chair, and then after a while, it's possible not to be. It's quite possible for the chairs that I'm looking at not to be. And eventually they will not be. In other words, I'm talking about perishable things. But if everything were perishable, if everything was contingent, and thus capable of going out of existence, then obviously there would nothing be existing right now. Things would have, after an infinite amount of time, things would have all gone out of existence. But clearly, things do exist now. We see them. Therefore, there must be something which is imperishable, something that is necessary. And that something we all understand to be God. So there we go. 3 of St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 proofs. You can Google it and look up his other 2. These proofs and his others lead to the conclusion that God exists and is absolutely perfect. They probably sound logical to you. They probably sound sound. But I need to, in the interest of fairness, I need to balance them out with the main arguments against the existence of God. That atheist friend of yours might offer this one to you after you have given him 3 of St. Thomas Aquinas' proofs. He might give you this one. And it is cited by a modern philosopher, Dr. Tom Morris, who is the author of one of my favorite books. I really love it. Author of Philosophy for Dummies. As I say, I like that one. His proof is very simple, and the logic is irrefutable. Once you accept the premises on which the conclusion is based. Premise 1, if there is a God, there would be no evil in this world. Sounds reasonable. All good, God. There would be no evil. God everywhere, omnipresent. There would be no evil. Premise 2, there is evil in the world. We see it. We read about it. The conclusion, therefore, is there is no God. That seems absolutely irrefutable on the face of it. Now, obviously, you can't accept both the arguments of St. Thomas Aquinas for the existence of God and Tom Morris's offering of an argument against the existence of God, though both seem absolutely logical. So you need to think about that quite a bit, I think. But not now, not here. I'm speaking. Let us now go to the Bible, and we will see there are some references to perfection. The Bible is full, chock full of references to perfection in the Old and in the New Testament. But I'll focus for now on the New Testament. In Matthew 19, Jesus counsels a rich young ruler who asks, "Good teacher, what good thing shall I do to have eternal life?" Jesus' initial reply to him is, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but the one, that is, God," unquote. Please note that to Jesus too, as to us, God is the only perfect being. Jesus goes on to tell the young man that what he should do if he wants to inherit eternal life is to keep the commandments. The young man asks, "Which commandments?" Jesus says, I quote, "You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself." The young man says to Jesus, "All these things I have kept from my youth. What do I still lack?" Clearly, the young man, if he has kept all those commandments, is a pretty good fellow. But he thinks there's something lacking, he says. Apparently, he wants perfection. And that is why Jesus answers him with these words, "If you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me." Unquote. But when the young man heard that, he went away sorrowful, for he was very rich. In the following few verses after that anecdote, Jesus goes on to tell the audience that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Just incidentally, the needles are not the needles that we sew with. They're talking about turnstiles. It's easier for a camel to go through a turnstile than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. What Jesus is saying is that your wealth cannot be more important to you than your spirituality. And clearly, with that young man, his wealth was more important than his desire to enter into eternal life. In Matthew 5, we read of Jesus telling his disciples how to be perfect. I quote, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you, so that you may become sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what do you do more than others? Even the tax collectors do so." Clearly, they had something against tax collectors in those days. I wonder if we have anything against tax collectors in these days. Think about that. Therefore, Jesus continues, "Therefore, be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Unquote. Here, what Jesus is doing is contrasting how most people treat their enemies and friends. They treat them differently with how God treats everybody equally, giving rain and sunlight to both the good and the bad. Jesus is saying that to be perfect, we must love everybody. We now come to Dr. Holmes and Science of Mind and Perfection. So far, we've been a little philosophical, but you will find that Dr. Holmes is quite practical with his concepts of perfection. We can use these concepts of perfection to our advantage. Now, interestingly, Dr. Holmes, who is a 20th century man, he's the founder of religious science, the philosophy and teaching of this church. Dr. Holmes seems to go back to Plato's theory of spiritually perfect forms existing, as it were, like ideal blueprints somewhere. And his idea that objects in the visible universe are merely shadows of those ideas. Dr. Holmes writes, "When Jesus said to the man, 'Stretch forth thine hand,' Jesus undoubtedly saw a perfect hand." Dr. Holmes makes the point that if everything is mental, and if Jesus saw an imperfect hand instead of a perfect one, the so-called miracle would not have resulted. This, Dr. Holmes says, is according to the law of cause and effect. Thought is the cause, and the visible universe and conditions and people in our lives is the effects. And this is where Dr. Holmes gets really practical. He's talking about conceptualizing perfection when you are praying for yourself or when you're treating for somebody else. So a spiritual mind treatment practitioner does not treat a sick man. He deals only with the idea. A spiritual man. Otherwise, he might enter into the vibration of suffering and might himself experience the result of that vibration. So from what we know, Jesus must have seen only the perfect hand so that the man's hand could become perfect. Now, even though Jesus might have recognized the false condition, as far as his word of healing was concerned, it would have been the recognition of perfection. Otherwise, to repeat, it would not have worked. Dr. Holmes reminds us that healing is not creating a perfect idea or a perfect body. It is revealing an idea which is already perfect. And again, we go back to Plato and his perfect form. Dr. Holmes writes, in consciousness with the infinite, one alone constitutes a majority. So if the practitioner is in tune with God, it really doesn't matter what the rest of the world believes about the apparently sick person. Well, it's a fact that the person might be sick. Doesn't matter, because the practitioner is in tune with God, and one with God is a majority. Knowing this in your thoughts, says Dr. Holmes, you should work in perfect peace and calm. And in his textbook, where I got this extract from, he has in capital letters, always expect the good. Always expect the good. The point being, you get what you expect. Dr. Holmes says, have enthusiasm, and above all, have a consciousness of love, a radiant feeling flowing through your consciousness at all times. You, the practitioner, should treat yourself until you have an inner sense of unity with all good, and do this regardless of any condition that might appear. In his book, The Science of Mind, in the section called The Perfect Universe, Dr. Holmes uses the word perfect several times as he explains how we should think. He points out that the truth is indivisible, and whole. God is complete and perfect, and we should disregard any evidence to the contrary. The student, the practitioner, conducting treatment, should maintain that he lives in a perfect universe and among people who are potentially, Dr. Holmes uses that word, potentially perfect. If the spiritual universe were not perfect, Dr. Holmes says, it could not exist for a single moment. So we are potentially perfect. It is not true, Dr. Holmes says, it's not true that we have made no mistakes. But if the belief in the necessity of mistakes stays in the consciousness, then there is bound to be more mistakes made. So get rid of that from your consciousness, because there are no mistakes in the divine plan. If a man, Dr. Holmes gives this example, if a man has apparently lost many opportunities, He must be shown that he stands at the point right now, right here, of limitless opportunity. The opportunity is today, now, and the person should see it and grasp that opportunity. For we live in a universe of limitless opportunities. A mountaintop is a real thing, but it is not a thing that exists by itself. A wave is a real thing, but it does not exist by itself. A mountaintop is an expression of the larger mountain. A wave is an expression of the larger ocean. Your mind is a real thing, but it does not exist by itself. Your mind is part of the larger one mind, God's mind. And when you think, you use God's mind, the perfect mind. As infinite mind created the universe, so your mind creates your universe. Your universe is part of the infinite universe. Dr. Holmes's message is, we are one. One. Only one. And if the universe is perfect and you're part of the universe, you too are potentially perfect. You've got to just start thinking perfection. In praying for yourself or treating for someone else, Dr. Holmes says, start with this simple proposition. The nature of God, of man, and of being is perfect, harmonious, whole. And in treating, conform your thoughts to this idea. Let the prayer be a treatment, a moving thing, a series of thoughts or statements followed by a realization. A growing spiritual atmosphere should come into your consciousness. I'd like us to try that right now. Let us say a series of spiritual statements and see if we feel that spiritual atmosphere surrounding us and being inside of us. I'm going to say these statements. Please repeat after me. God is peace. I am peaceful. God is joy. I am joyful. God is health. I am healthy. God is abundance. I have abundance. And perhaps the most important of the spiritual statements. God is love. I am loving and loved. And just to put icing on the cake of that spiritual atmosphere that I can feel, I want you to say with me this poem, which you know very well and will help to engender further that spiritual atmosphere. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my opponents. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Do you feel that spiritual atmosphere? Now, since we live in a universe of cause and effect, and our thought causes our conditions and the events in our lives, what do you think will be the effect of that spiritual atmosphere just created? The effect will be our universe is a mirror of our thoughts, so what will be reflected out of that spiritual atmosphere will manifest in your world. That, folks, is how it works perfectly. Namaste. And after that talk, we're going to have what I suspect will be another perfect presentation, a musical item by Dr. Sonia Williams.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When God the Spirit Almighty, a constant friend within, my eyes on the sparrow, I know God made me free. My eyes on the sparrow, for I know God made me free. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. My eyes on the sparrow, 'cause I know God made me free. Let not my heart be troubled. God's tender word I hear, and resting on His goodness, I lose my doubts and fears. By the path God leadeth, just one step I may see, 'cause my eyes on the sparrow, I know God made me free. My eyes on the sparrow, 'cause I know God made me free. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. My eyes on the sparrow, 'cause I know God made me free. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. My eyes on the sparrow, 'cause I know God made me
I would have said perfect. Let us now have another quite beautiful item. The prayer of Jamaica. And it's found in your flyer for those who are in the physical temple. Prayer of Jamaica. Together, please stand. The radiant light of God's love is now flowing through us and from us to everything and everyone it touches. The eternal light of God's love now completely fills, covers, and surrounds our island, Jamaica. The glowing intensity of the light of God's love now interpenetrates and awakens within the hearts and minds of our countrymen and women the truths of life which set free. The light of God's love is growing and glowing in intensity in the hearts and minds of mankind everywhere. Love, health, harmony, goodwill, peace, uprightness, integrity, joy, prosperity, kindness, and our oneness under God are now established, and so it is. We're now going to have the affirmative closing prayer and then the peace song. Please join me as we give thanks for God's presence with us in this space, God's presence online, God's presence within, God's presence without. God has been with us as peace, as joy, as abundance, as love, as harmony, as goodwill, and the infinite blessings of God we have been all aware of and open our hearts and minds and accept. And because we have that atmosphere of God's presence, we know that what manifests in our lives is good, is of God, and we know that all is well. And as we prepare to go to our separate destinations, we take with us that feeling, that awareness of God's presence, of God's love, of God's light and abundance and guidance. And we know we cannot put a foot wrong as we walk along our path throughout this life of unfolding. All is well. And knowing that as I have spoken, it is a truth, I release my words into the law of mine, and I give thanks that all this is so it is. And just before our peace song, I'd like you to take your love offering in your hands and say after me, or say with me, the love offering blessing found on the envelope. Together, lovingly I give, joyfully I receive. Be thou fruitful, increase, and multiply. Bless, prosper, and enrich, touch, and replenish all of my financial affairs. Thank you, Father, and so it is. The peace, yes, there is peace on earth. Yes, there is peace on earth, and yes, it begins with me. Yes, there is peace on earth, a peace that was meant to be, with God as our Father, family all are we walk with each other in perfect harmony. Yes, peace begins with me. Yes, this is the moment now. With every step I take, yes, this is my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Yes, there is peace on earth, and yes, it begins with me.
Now, I'd just like to remind everyone, if you can, please stay behind for Discovery with Reverend Michael this morning at 10:30. Thank you so much for being here, in line and in person.